Hello everyone, I am going to talk about Halo 3. Now, this is kind of an odd thing to take. I've literally thought about this for years, about how to approach this, and I've thought about different video ideas I'd had, different ways to approach this topic, but the ultimate reality is that I really don't like Halo 3. And to most people, that sounds like a gamer sin. It's like, how can you not like the first person shooter of all time? Uh, and my answer to that is that because Halo 2 and 1 were better. And I'm going to go through essentially a series of things that I want to address about Halo 3 that, you know, people kind of see Bungie as the golden standard, and I do still actually believe that. But honestly, Halo 3 for me, it feels very undercooked in a lot of ways. And I remember when it came out, I played the hell out of it, but it was not quite as good as its predecessors. And I'm just going to go through why I felt that way. Basically, well, right off the bat, Halo 3, it's on, the 360 now. It's, the flagship for Xbox, and it's using next-gen hardware. And the one thing I don't like about it is that there's bloom everywhere. So from an aesthetic value, there's just way too much bloom. It looks like Master Chief almost looks like a little like McDonald's toy almost. Everything has this plastic effect to it. Looking back on it now, it's, it wasn't as gritty and as kind of interesting as Halo 1 was. And this is just really something that plagues most 7th gen games, is that everything has a massive light map. Like, there are just light sources everywhere. So those really dark, intense areas where you would fight the Flood, which is supposed to be horror themed, in 7th gen, doing horror was very difficult because everything was so goddamn bright. The only game that really stood out was Dead Space, and somehow they got it to where even Dead Space aesthetic, even over the remake that came out recently, is so they were able to retain the kind of darkness from 6th gen and before, where it has this gritty, lack of light in it, and it's something that is very sensitive and perhaps subjective that a lot of people won't agree with. So let me address something that I think is really the bigger issue that I really, really dislike, which is the weapon balancing in Halo 3. So when they said in the, in the hype and the build up for this game that they're bringing back the assault rifle, the Magnum, they're bringing back all the weapons into one game, I lost my mind. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. We're going to be able to use everything. And what actually happened is that when they bring back, it made me realize in Halo 2, they got rid of the assault rifle, but they had to do the battle rifle and the SMG. So there's a long range and a short range, automatic and semi-automatic. When you bring all those weapons into Halo, it's not like you're bringing back the original weapons as they were in Halo 1 and Halo 2. They are now kind of modified. And they're modified in the sense that they are basically balanced so that everything feels equally crappy, more or less. They bring back the Magnum, but it's not even scoped. And it has a really slow fire rate, and it's pretty much a useless weapon. Like, no one ever uses the Magnum in Halo. And the assault rifle itself, yeah, it has a great high rate of fire, but it feels like, I don't know, a Lego toy or something. It feels so dinky. It feels not as impactful and as powerful as the original. And the Magnum is not as powerful, obviously. So they had to rebalance everything. And in that case, when every gun is, nerfed down, nothing really feels good. And everyone ends up using the battle rifle anyway as their main weapon, at least in the multiplayer sense. I think the other thing I just need to address too is that the hype for Halo 3 was insane. It was there. I have never experienced hype for another game like that except for No, not even Elden Ring. The hype for Halo 3 was insane. It was like there's gonna be way more, with next gen consoles, there's gonna be way more graphics, way more weapons, way more things. They added equipment now. They're still dual wielding. The story's gonna conclude. It's gonna be the biggest game ever. Finish the fight was everywhere, and the marketing. Oh my god, the marketing. They had a friggin' video, a short movie. I mean, it was more of a short, like skirmish, whatever. That was directed by Peter Jackson. Like, are you kidding me? Like the insanity and the quality and the realism of what they were able to accomplish. The fact that this is when games were starting to resemble real life, and people's faces could actually be seen and stuff like this. And in combination with the story and the music. And I remember the first teaser trailer, it just showed Cortana speaking in the desert, and then it showed Master Chief and the huge triumphant orchestra playing as the Ark was revealed, in front of this giant crater in New Mombasa. And then the other trailer where you had the two kids, it was obviously like almost like filmed lying in the reeds. It's talking about what's out there, and then it has this, and it turns out it's a flashback, and it goes to modern day, and it shows Chief running across this battlefield, with all these wraiths and everything, and then it ends, all these, plasma grenades going off, and him picking up his helmet, putting it on, and running into the pitch of battle, and just ending immediately after with saying Halo 3 finished the fight. Like, the commercials for this game are they were insanely well done. I've never seen a more well coordinated marketing campaign than Halo 3. I think in the history of gaming, I can't think of a more hype and well coordinated marketing campaign. There are of course things that cost more, like the marketing for Red Dead Redemption 2 stands out in my mind as insanely huge spending. I saw it advertised on buses, on subway stops. I saw it everywhere, but it did not have the momentum that Halo 3 had, because people were genuinely excited for this thing. People were genuinely, oh my god, this is going to be the biggest and best game ever. And like launch night was a huge deal. That's when like the launch parties and everything were a massive thing. And people going home, playing it, getting on Xbox Live, doing those first multiplayer matches, doing the campaign. Man. And then they had, I'm sorry, I even forgot, they had another commercial where they were like filming people as if it was like a documentary, of like a World War II style documentary, or like, oh, what was the battle like? And they were all saying, oh yeah, I know, it's really harsh. And then Master Chief showed up. And then they had this whole collage where it had this little like I guess, I don't know what to call it, like a little like claymation, or almost like a figurine setup, and it was like a monument to the battle that was taking place, and it just has this emotional piano music and a slow camera pan after each like section, and finally it shows Master Chief in the middle with a plasma grenade, surrounded by enemies. And at the end, it ends up with him doing a stop motion animation where he lifts his helmet to the screen and says, finish the fight. Like, the amount of creative, cool stuff and the hype around this game were astronomical. And I think because of that in itself, the game itself could not actually deliver on the hype it was producing. And it by no means is it a bad game, but like, it's so interesting to look at how the perception of the game was before it released, of what it was going to be, and then when it actually released, what it actually is. And I wish it could have lived up to its hype, but it just couldn't. It was to me, in my mind, it was hyped up to be the greatest game of all time. And in fact, there were quite a few games coming out in this time, which were all letdowns actually of my favorite franchises. So it wasn't just Halo 3. I was actually very excited for, I know, God forbid, Sonic 06. I had been waiting for Sonic Adventure 3 for a while, and I thought this was it. And the trailers all looked good, and I hadn't seen any of the gameplay, and I saw the gameplay, and I was like, I see. This might have not go the way I want. The other game franchise that I was hyper into was, of course, Legend of Zelda, and around this time, Twilight Princess came out, and again, it looked like everything that I wanted. It looked to be, finally a hyper-realistic, serious, epic Zelda that could rival something like Lord of the Rings, and Twilight Princess came out, and it looked the part, and it played more or less like a Zelda game, but it was just very mid. It was just like, whatever, man. Like, it's not bad. Again, it's not bad, but all of these were just like, they lost the formula or the magic or the vision of what this thing should be, and it became a little bit derivative. And again, it's not awful, but it's just not what we wanted, not what we were expecting. All the potential that we were expecting just was never realized. And I think it's an interesting point to go back to. Like, friggin', I'm sorry to go on this tangent about Zelda, but, the Twilight Princess trailer had, the thing, blades will bleed, shields will shatter. And it was the first Zelda game in a while that was rated T for teen. Like, oh, finally, we're getting our really mature, epic, new Zelda that's gonna, finally, break into the mainstream. And it did not do that. I mean, it did kind of break into the mainstream, but just not really. It didn't really do that. It wouldn't be until Breath of the Wild, honestly, until it became kind of mainstreamish. But anyway, so 7th Gen was a series of real disappointments for me, to be honest. A real series of just, this is okay. And it really was, I think, a while of just chasing the dragon, wanting that original experience, wanting that soulful experience that just never happened. And Halo 3 was just one of those games as well. My biggest issue, honestly, with Halo 3, besides the weapon balancing, I don't really care about that. I just say that so people won't chop my head off right out the gate. My biggest thing about Halo 3 is honestly the story. There is so much bad dialogue, inconsistent plot holes, and such a terrible wrap up to this amazing trilogy from a story perspective that I just can't. I'm still like vacillating and morose about it over a decade later. So what am I talking about? Well, first of all, the one dialogue where like you end the third or whatever mission, and Miranda's like, oh, troops are saying where they should go, ma'am, and she's like, to war. What? What? Miranda, like, she's supposed to be this reliable character. You can't just have her say to war like it's a cool thing, because the guy asked her a legit question. You can't just say like, oh, I'm gonna be really cool now. Like, it's so like, that's okay for some characters in some situations, but they're already at war. They're losing the war, and you're like, where should they go? To war. Are you kidding me? Are you actually kidding me with this like chuny dialogue? It just doesn't work. If it was Sergeant Johnson saying it, or like as a joke, but no, Miranda's okay. I'm not gonna. You get the idea. Another thing, the fact, and this is all gonna be spoilers, by the way. So, the fact that 343 Guilty Spark is like, oh, you are Forerunner. I kind of knew it was implied that the humans were related to the Forerunners in some way, that they were maybe a sub-race or created by the Forerunners or related to them in some way. But to have the dialogue say, you are Forerunner, as if this, like, that's how you do your big reveal. Like, there's no mystery, no big, oh, aha moment. It's just like slapped in your face like a big salami and saying, okay, right, now pay up, give me the bill. Like, it was just so incredibly lazy. Another big thing that also really gets me is the voice actor for Truth. I swear to God they changed him in this game because he sounds like a crotchety old man, while in the original he sounded like this like conniving, sinister, dangerous spirit. And in this game he sounds like an old fart that you just kill. And then the stupidest thing, when the Arbiter kills him, it takes a second and then he screams and goes ah like a moron. Bungie obviously listened to their fan base that people hated the Arbiter in 2. And so in this game, you don't even play as him at all. You play him if you're doing co-op, which is another thing that's really stupid. I literally was trying, I remember I was so fixated, judge me if you will, but I was trying to email Bungie. I was actually trying to find Bungie's offices and email them over this aspect of co-op that for the first time using online, it was this amazing thing that you could do 4-player co-op. And I thought, oh, this is so cool. So you're gonna have Master Chief, Arbiter, who are your other 2 guys? Random elites. Literal whoever elites that don't even matter in the scope of the story. And it's like they're not even other Spartans, they're just random elites. Like, it is such a crap decision, even when people are like, we don't like playing as elites, and then they add just random elites as player 3 and 4. And it just drove me insane. Because at that time I had read Fall of Reach, I had read First Strike, and the other Halo book, the second one in between one, and I was I think also reading the 4th one about Kurt and the Spartan 3s. I think that was later, but I was literally trying to write to Bungie offices and trying to email them, hey, you should include Linda and oh God, forgive me, I can't remember their names. So the other Spartans for the Spartan 2 program who were part of Reach, I was like, those should be player 3 and 4. And I was so fixated on like screaming at them at this simple fix. Like you would just use the same Spartan sprite or avatar and just change the number on the suit. That's all you would have to do. And I literally went to it was the Bungie.net forum or something, and I ended up emailing like the owner of the website who was not affiliated with Bungie at all. And oh my God, I was just a kid and I didn't know how the internet worked, or I couldn't find their email or anything. And my God, but I was just so fixated on this one aspect that I thought, what a waste of potential, what a stupid thing to do. Also, just in general, the brutes are not fun to fight, and the elites are just so much better. And the fact we can't have the elites in this game, they bring it back immediately in Halo Reach, but like the elites are so much more fun to fight, and the brutes are just these big Donkey Kongs I just don't want to have to deal with. Also, oh my God, I'm really getting into this now. The equipment sucks. Besides the bubble shield and the disable blue thing, the disruptor or whatever it's called, equipment is useless. The friggin' okay, well, I know the life generating thing, that's good for multiplayer, but like a lot of it is just useless. To have the X button dedicated to like things that should honestly just be grenades or some form of grenade that you can swap between is embarrassing. And the fact that we had to swap from X to reload, a classic thing that I still think should be standard today, to LB and RB, which I mean at the time it was kind of cool because that like it made sense from a dual wielding perspective. It just doesn't make sense because you're not always dual wielding. But that's what they went with. And yes, I know you could probably change it in, the control settings, but regardless of that. The brute weapons, the gravity hammer was actually a nice addition. Not super useful, I think. I mean, it did work, I guess, but I don't know. It was cool though that you could rip off turrets in this game and move around with them. That was actually really cool. What other kind of gameplay mechanics? Like, oh, the landmine, for example. No one ever drove into the landmine. No one ever drove into the landmine. Plus, because you could always just shoot it and was just totally like useless. And this was the beginning of things like armor abilities, I guess. Trying to like change up the formula. But I think it really is a case of less is more. What other weapons did they add? They added the brute spiker, or the little like the machine gun they have. That really wasn't very useful. Um, they added the Hornet in multiplayer. That was kind of cool. Oh, and in single player, I forgot in the campaign, that one campaign mission. Actually, the Hornet's really cool. I love the Hornet. It's very very well made. You also had Brute spike grenades, which were a pretty decent addition. Those made sense. It was fun to see them go all over the place. What else? Oh, well, I mean, we're getting into multiplayer now, but you also had the Elephants, which were multiplayer only, which were very kind of interesting and strange to have those. But those are, all of my best memories in Halo 3 multiplayer were with the Elephants, for sure. The only thing I would say about the Brute Hammer, honestly, the only thing I would change about it is I would increase the blast radius. I think it was kind of like, once you got it, felt cool, but you never actually got to really utilize it. I think its blast radius should have been higher. The Mongoose was a cool addition. That level where you're driving around the Scarabs, taking out the legs and armor, that was really fun. A multi-Scarab battle. That kind of third mission or fourth mission, once you're kind of going towards the Ark, is probably my favorite mission in the campaign. It's just very, very fun. Another thing I do have to say, though, about this game that was a huge, huge game changer that I honestly wish I saw in more games was Forge. The amount of hours spent in Forge was honestly amazing. It was so much fun, like optimizing a map. And I like the fact that they did limit the amount of items and the type of items you could put on the map, so you can like feel like you optimized it and you made like a little environmental storytelling. Like there was a human base here, and then they had to flee back here, and there were a bunch of Covenant weapons chasing them. And you know, there wasn't these huge terrain changes. They were just very small changes to the objects in the environment, and you could create crazy things like, you know, throw a bunch of laptops and stuff and barricades into the grav lift and see them all just go crazy. Stuff like that. It was also interesting, the Needler in this game became a power weapon. I think that's really funny / smart of them that they took one of the weakest, wimpiest weapons in the previous games and turned it into basically a power weapon. That was really cool. And you can't dual wield it anymore. I also think they really added a lot of cool stuff to Forge, like those little things that would be like sepia tones, and like they would change the actual look of the entire like map. A bunch of really cool DLC. They had that one kind of like forest, like abandoned warehouse in the forest map. That was really cool. There was a lot of stuff that, yeah, some of the DLC maps were really good, some of them really bad and kind of crappy. They had some returning Halo 2 and 1 maps. Sidewinder, or their version of Sidewinder, was really cool with the Hornets going through, you know, around, and then in the middle part you had most of the battles. That was a pretty fun multiplayer map. But honestly, again, I don't want to harp too much on this, but Halo 3 multiplayer is one of the weakest in the game, I feel. I really did not like it. I remember I forced myself to like it. I really did force myself a lot to play a lot of it. And, you know, and I thought I was delusional. Maybe I'm just wrong, that everyone loves, you know, the multiplayer here, and I'm just wrong. But playing the Master Chief Collection, having Halo 2, 3, and all the other side by side, Halo 2 is the absolute king. No question about it. Halo 3, it just has too many weapons, everything feels nerfed, and everyone uses, you know, battle rifles over and over again, and it just kind of sucks. I just don't enjoy Halo 3's multiplayer, and everything's so bright and colorful, and it just doesn't have that sense of seriousness, maybe the movement of the characters. There's so many things that I could talk about that I'm just not quite sure one thing overall deprecates the multiplayer experience, but it just does not feel fun to me. Maybe you die too quickly. I don't know. All I know is I prefer Halo 2 a lot more. Also, I never really liked this beginning jungle level and in the human base. Just the aesthetics of them are not interesting. It feels like you're in the middle of nowhere doing a nothing job and you're not affecting anything. and I hate the human base just looks ugly and grimy and is not interesting, and you don't get the sense of a huge military force at all. That's something I would even say, even up to Halo Reach. I was really disappointed in Reach because, like, again, it's supposed to be the human military main base complex in the entire galaxy. And you had these open fields and, like, yeah, you had the metropolitan skyscraper place. But, like, Earth, with all of its, you know, Cairo space stations and whatever, you know, was much more militarily impressive than Reach. Also, this is the other thing. Because of the bloom and the cell shading and the bright colors, like Johnson, like, for example, Johnson looks like way lighter skin tone. He looks like Mexican now when he was like black in the previous games. And like the aesthetic style of the humans just looks odd in this game. It looks trying, like it's trying too hard to be something else. And, you know, of course, Chief looks more or less fine. Arbiter looks more or less fine. But, you know, the original characters and the look of the humans in the original first two were just way better designed. Especially, oh my god, Cortana. Cortana in 1 had a very distinct aesthetic. It was like mostly purple with a bit of green and blues. And then in 2, she became more purple and streamlined and purple and white with white accents. And in this one, she just looks kind of odd. And even looking at this now, the models just seem kind of off a little bit. While in 1 and 2, they just were designed better, I guess. Also, I absolutely hate the random cryptic messages that Cortana pops up in the middle of the campaign where she'll say, "Oh, you are my sword and my shield." And it's just cryptic messages. Like, everything in Halo has a purpose and a point, but she would just rant cryptically at you with her giant face in your screen and slow down the gameplay to load the next area, and there's no reason and no lore explanation why she communicate with John's helmet millions of miles away. Is there like a backtraced like remnant data in John's, you know, cybernetic suit in his mainframe that is allowing this to happen? Is he like infected with a different version of Cortana? It's never explained. It's just cuz, bro. Just cuz it looks cool, but it doesn't make any sense. It's like, why is this happening? And even when you find Cortana, it's just like whatever. It's just like she's not rampant. She was just lonely and waiting for you. And honestly, it's so funny that the second you get Cortana, I feel like the game is getting better, and I feel like it's being saved. Oh yeah, yeah. Where should they go, ma'am? To war. Oh, Epic own style. Play Skrillex. Yeah, great, wonderful. But once you get Cortana, you essentially get a waypoint marker, and you get her banter and her dialogue back. And I think the funniest line in Halo 3, in the entire Halo franchise, was, you know, I was like, "Oh, what's your plan for getting out of here?" And John says, "Oh, I was thinking about shooting my way out, you know, mix things up a bit." Like, the dialogue and the banter between Chief and Cortana is just, it's too good for like a Western game. It is just too good to exist. It's just so well written. And again, I hate the design of the human base. Just the color tones are not interesting. This feels like some weird ass bunker you're in. Like, it's just really boring to be in this environment, and there just is nothing interesting about it. I think what really happened with time is that as a kid, when you played games, the possibilities of what a game could deliver to you were just seemingly endless. And with each new installment of a game series, it always felt like the possibilities of what a game was possible of doing was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's like we've hit this plateau now where everything is just copying everything else and everything's the same. And I never really thought of it until now, but, you know, the possibilities that we were promised in this game and in the 7th gen delivered and under-delivered at the same time in different aspects. And now I feel like I'm just not excited for gaming because no one is actually innovating anymore. And this is the one game that promised to be the game to end all games, and even that hype, that potential, or that marketing that, hey, we're going to make a game that's better than every other game, doesn't even exist anymore. I mean, rarely in some cases, like recently, like there's Tears of the Kingdom, Elden Ring, but every other game is like, we'll just copy this guy and do what they're doing. Again, I felt like they really, what other things I complain about, they really dumbed down the Arbiter in this game. Not only does he get less screen time, but all he does is yell at the camera. He's basically an idiot. His whole sort of deep, intense, emotional warrior's code and his struggle to, like, you know, find his place among, you know, the Covenant is completely gone. He's completely scrubbed. It's like they washed his brain and everything is just empty. Again, another thing that I think was done really well, but also not enough, were when you actually head to the Ark itself, and it turns out, you know, the Ark is actually a place to go to the Ark. I was expecting like an actual Ark where it keeps a thing of all life, but instead you go to this weird giant flower-shaped facility that is just really another excuse to do another Halo, and it's a Halo-like environment. I just thought that was so friggin' lazy. It's like, oh, we found another Halo. Like, there's a point where it does get redundant and tiresome. The cool thing, though, that I wanted to see more of or more emphasis on are the terminals on the Ark and other places in Halo 3, because they're all these scrambled messages about these very specific things, like the Maginot Sphere, which led me down a rabbit hole onto the Maginot Line, which were like, it was a French series of defenses during World War II. I know, things like that, where you just find these weirdly worded archives that you run through that are just so interesting, and you just have these little pieces of the Forerunners and their code, and it's just told in the perfect cryptic style where they use code and terminology for all these different things, and you are kind of left trying to figure out what the pieces are. And just the writing style of how those terminals were written reminded me a lot even of like the old Marathon terminals, which I absolutely adore. And that's one thing I really did enjoy. I think maybe also the fact that Cortana has such a big impact on the story that, like, she's just integral to the Halo experience, so it feels weird to be without her. You know, and again, the game overall feels rushed in that last aspect. You kind of like, you find Cortana, there's like a new, different, incomplete Halo. She has the, I think it's smart actually from writing that she has the activation key from Halo 1 that she can use to activate it there. And again, it doesn't make any sense to me, again. Because, like, why are you activating? What are you doing activating Halo when it's the one thing you don't want to do? That's against your plan and the entire premise of the game and the lore. And for some reason, when they activate the Halo, it also blows up the Ark. And if you just blow up everything, that solves everything. Like, to me, it was insane. It never made any sense. But, you know, the other super redeemable thing I do have to admit about Halo 3 is the final chapter. The fact that you end up taking a Warthog and driving it through the final Halo as it blows up, and to get onto an Amberclad or whatever ship that is and take it out of there was super, super cool. That moment was a historic video game moment without question. It was honestly one of the coolest moments without compare. That was like one saving grace of the campaign. Speaking of the campaign, the flood level was awful. You're basically inside someone's inner and lower intestines, and you're just stuck in there for like what feels like hours trying to get Cortana out. And the flood in this one, again, the scenes where it's trying to be scary and spooky and the bloom is everywhere, it just does not work. Like the actual, like Halo 1, when you did the lament for Private John Jenkins or whatever, like that entire chapter was legitimately scary. It was legitimately horror themed and cosmic horror themed, where you found this thing deep underground that you were not supposed to uncover, and now that it's awake, it's eating and killing everyone. And you get to see, like, through the security cam footage, how they got killed by the flood. Like, all those different tones and genres in one game is really just incredible. And in Halo 3, even the Gravemind is treated like dumbed down. Like, I know what happened to the writing, but and the whole aspect where Truth or whoever, like, Truth ends up killing Miranda with a spiker, and then he uses Johnson to activate the thing. And it's cool, right? Because that's cool that they imply that only humans can activate Forerunner technology. So you didn't have to have Guilty Spark come out and say, you are Forerunner. Like, it could have done it in any other way and better implied. And then, of course, at the end, Johnson dies to 343 by getting blasted by him. That's fine. That's a good send-off for that character, I guess. But what really irked me about that scene is the fact you could actually kill 343. Like, I'm sorry, but we're talking about the life form, the machine that survived the destruction of the original Halo ring. Like, you see, if you get the legendary ending, you see the Halo ring blow up, and your extra cutscene is seeing that 343 survives that. That is insane. And you're telling me that this Forerunner piece of technology basically dies to like a few sustained blasts from a human-made Spartan laser in like technologically primitive weapon? Are you kidding me? Are you serious? That is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So here's what I thought. You could still have the Sergeant Johnson sacrifice, but you just do it differently, where like Johnson had to sacrifice himself to contain 343, or like send him off on some other area of the ring or something. But to have you defeat 343 through like conventional like weapons and methods, I mean, it was well done from a gameplay perspective, but it just did not make sense lore-wise and story-wise. And that's like the one big complaint I have about that scene. And a lot of things I have about that scene. Oh my god. Again, I felt like that whole level, that last one should have been like a little bit longer before you got to the actual control room. Oh god, the other thing that just I thought was stupid is the fact, just get this. So somehow, that's fine. It's like I'll accept this. Somehow, the Gravemind sends a Covenant-infected ship all the way to Earth. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. I'll accept that this happened and whatever, and and so the flood ends up in New Mombasa, and now you have like the flood in Earth, and again you're like doubling back through this level, but now it's flood infested. Whatever, that's fine. But what happens after that? It's like, okay, we find the Ark. We're going to follow the Ark through this passageway, through the Armada to the Covenant fleet, and we're going to find the real Ark, the thing that controls all the Halos and can fire them at all times, whatever. And again, just in general, the Ark's architecture just was not impressive. It's just a bigger, flatter Halo. There's nothing about, yes, they have these big mega structures, but they're not different from what we've really seen. I was expecting the Ark's control room to look really distinct and interesting. Yes, you have that cool part where it's like all the waterfalls and whatever, but like this is the command center for the entire galaxy. I expected something way cooler looking, frankly. Like the friggin' Sentinels in Halo 2 are just bodyguards. I was expecting something like the big ones, I was expecting something much, much different. But yeah, so the flood, the flood have infected Earth. And even the shipmaster in the same scene after that happens, before they go to the Ark, is like, we have to blast the entire continent. A single flood spore could destroy an entire civilization. And I'm like, okay, I agree. The flood is incredibly dangerous and needs to be wiped out. So you need to blast the entire continent, right? But then Lord Hood is like, oh, Chief, go with our Covenant allies and go to the Ark and finish the fight, and we'll stay here and fight the flood. I'm like, Excuse me, idiot. If you can't contain the flood immediately and glass the planet, or glass half the the planet and the continent in that section, you might as well not go. If the flood is still active before you leave, that is a way bigger threat to humanity than the Ark. So I hate the fact that most of the humans stay back for this threat that seems to be dealt with. It just does not make sense. It's stupid. And when they come back, there's no mention and there's no image of like of them fighting the flood. When you come back at the end of Halo 3 back to Earth, it's like, oh yep, no, we were expecting you. How did the battle go? There's no follow-up on that. So they all just hang back for like no reason, for like whatever. I just thought that was so lazy and stupid. The other thing too, the final levels of this game, so like the one where you're in High Charity and it's all flood and whatever, here's also a big thing that also changed in 2007 for me, is that I kind of realized way before Gamergate that the video game market or journalism is incredibly corrupt, because when IGN did the review for the Halo 3 back in the day, like again, this was the most hyped up game of like the decade. In the review, the guy's like, yeah, this last level in the campaign is honestly awful. It's terrible and no one likes it. But, everything else makes up for it. And, it's like, okay, fair enough. So they scored a 10 out of 10. And I was like, hold on a second here. You admitted that there's something in this game that actually is really bad and that people don't like, but you still give it a perfect score. And I just thought to myself, because it's not just that's wrong with the game. The gameplay is kind of there's all these other things that aren't great. The multiplayer is okay. It's not as good as its predecessors. And I just thought how could they give this a 10? It's like a 9, sure, but it's not a 10 because it's not perfect. You want it to be perfect. The hype asks you to be perfect, but it can't be. And this was 2007. This was the year when video game revenue eclipsed movies and music, and advertising and media and culture totally changed, and the iPhone came out, and everything just really changed with this game and how we consumed media and what was considered quality and what was considered shilling and people paying for paid game reviews. And sadly, this was the first example that really made me put IGN in the trash. The Halo 3 review was something that made me doubt IGN's genuine intentions for reviewing video games. For maybe other people, it might have been later or sooner, but for me, it was this game that made me lose faith in IGN. But yeah, the dialogue is just not the same. The music, there are definitely some really good tracks in here, but unlike Halo 1 and 2, where every track was a banger, there was a lot of them that just weren't, that were just like, this is fine, this is okay. The campaign was a lot shorter. Again, the multiplayer, I wasn't crazy about the multiplayer. It was really cool that you could unlock, rather not unlock, but you could do things like upload clips, screenshots, forge maps, game types. Like, the social aspects of Halo 3 were really incredible, and to this day, they're kind of unparalleled. They've never actually been replicated in their scope. Even modern games that want to have a less social, experience, they don't really live up to it, which is shocking. Another improvement that I think Halo 3 did have is the chopper. The chopper is a kick-ass vehicle. The Elephant and multiplayer. The amount of times we'd screw up. If we ever did a Forge map, we always did Sandtrap, and we always messed around with the Elephants. And there's that one epic clip, I think, that even is still recirculated today. The guy who's running through that map with the flag, and the choppers and the guns are all trying to gun him down, and they save him. And that cooperative experience in Halo is way, way more fun and just classic. Even though I don't think this game is the best of the Halos, it was still distinctly somewhat Halo in that. I remember one vehicle also in this game that we never saw a reappearance of, were the AA wraiths, the ones that were anti-aircraft wraiths. Those were kind of neat looking, and their trails or whatever. Also, I felt like I never really got the full Halo experience on the Ark. Like, we had that big sand map where you got the tanks. That was really cool. But the one where you had to go through the 3 towers, I felt like we were finally getting somewhere, but there's never, I don't know, it felt like the game was starting to feel like how it should, and then it started to become something else. I don't know how to put it, but like the peak is when you're going on the way to the control room to the grave mine. You had to fight 2 scarabs at once. That was really, really cool and really epic, honestly. I don't know, it almost reminds me a little bit of Metal Gear Solid 4 in that the last level of Metal Gear Solid 4 feels like the most traditional Metal Gear Solid and is actually fun. And by the time the game really gets into that, it's already over, and then you're at the final boss suddenly. That's kind of how I feel with this game. It like has elements of really good gameplay in it, and then it just kind of sells everything short. The dialogue is kind of mid, the gameplay is kind of mid. It's just slightly less worse, but has a lot more bloom and oomph and presentation than the previous games, but the soul of it is missing somehow. Anyway, I was terrified to voice his opinion back in the day. It was very it was a lot more social, and the to criticize what kids considered the greatest game of the decade. And plus that's when Halo really shifted into more of a kid-friendly demographic than older adults. And that's why kids just didn't have anything else to run a standard by, and a lot of them really didn't play the first ones. They just thought, oh well, the other ones obviously suck, and it's just so frustrating. And obviously Microsoft realized there was a market for this new generation, because they obviously released the Master Chief Collection and the Halo Anniversary and Halo 2 Anniversary and all these other things, which I absolutely hate. I hate the aesthetic of the new Anniversary ones. It's bloom, it's bright, it's everything I really dislike about Halo 3 turned up a notch. And the original aesthetic of the games is lost, which is just way better, darker, heavier tones, much cooler looking. The other thing that also really, really, really bothered me about Halo at the time is the M rating. Like, there is barely any blood in this game, like to the extent that this was a time where games were marketing themselves based on the fact they were rated M for mature. But at the same time, they made content that was not M for mature at all. So I really hated this because, one, it like stopped. At this point, parents did not really care what their kids were playing. They're like, it's a video game. He wants to play it. All his friends has it. We don't really take the ESRB, seriously, basically. Aside from that, I really didn't like that, because then every other game that was M rated that actually had that content in it, they would say, oh, well, Mom, you already got me this game, so therefore I can handle other games like Gears of War, the other Xbox flagship title, not really, well, at the time. And so, like, Gears of War, you can chainsaw someone in half and have their guts fall all over the floor and have them turn into, like, blood guts that you can kick over the floor. That compared to like the millimeters of blood that you get from shooting a body in Halo 3 are very different things. And that's why it really like upset me that these standards were just like being completely ignored. That Halo was like, oh yeah, we're an M-rated game. Even Call of Duty, there's not even that much blood in that game where it's like, yeah, we're an M-rated game, when really it should have been T for teen. But they would not do T for teen because the perception at the time is like, oh, what is this, a little kid's game? No, I'm a little edgy kid, and I want to play big grown-up games that are really cool and sophisticated, such for myself. And I want to, I'm not going to play anything that's not rated M for mature. I mean, because I'm mature enough to do it, and I'm going to rebel against my mom and play video games. That was a mentality at the time. And so it just always, I was so passionate about this stupid point that either Halo 3 should have been rated T for teen, or I don't know, the ESRB could have done something about the actual gory games, because it's basically marketing to the effect that kids would end up getting things, or parents would end up buying things for kids that really were not appropriate for them. I don't know and don't care what other people think, but a 13-year-old should not be playing Gears of War. It is incredibly violent and not appropriate for them. If there's any game that needs like a rating that people actually listen to, it's probably Gears of War. You should not have kids playing that, and I was aware of that. I mean, as soon as I turned 17 or whatever, or as soon as I felt like I was ready, I rented. I remember I rented Gears of War 2 actually, and gave that a whirl when I was able to. But I never wanted to before that, so I can't really speak. Again, like, kids are gonna get what they're gonna get. If they want that M-rated experience, they're gonna get it. They're gonna find a way. I mean, I remember in the old school days, it was a big thing. Your older brother would have Grand Theft Auto. It's like, oh, I can't play this. It's rated M for mature. Grand Theft Auto was the big bad game that you weren't allowed to play, and it was such a big deal. And you could, shoot down people in the streets and kill hookers and take a flamethrower and a jetpack and could jump off the Empire State Building and kill a businessman or something. And that was back in the time when people were so concerned they thought video games actually affected, caused violent tendencies, which was obviously obviously fake, and I knew it was fake. But at the same time, I didn't want other people or other kids being exposed to content that literally could damage them. But yeah, I never wanted to play games that weren't meant for me. I'm like, the ESRB is there for a reason, and there are some exceptions where games are rated T or E when they should be rated something else, but I'm like, these are the rules, we should be following them. And I was that kid that I never, like, my parents were not super controlling, so when they said I couldn't have something or something wasn't meant for me, it was like, okay, fine, because it usually wasn't. I never understood the concept of, oh, hey, you can't have this, therefore you should go out and seek it. Like, there were, like, I was just like, okay, fine, I'm like, I don't want it anyway. So I never understood the mentality of wanting something just for the sake that you can't have it. It just was foreign to me. It's like, why should I care? Why should I bother them? And it's like, yeah, some of this content is genuinely disturbing. I don't want to be exposed to it. Thank you for the M rating. And it's like, I can make my own decisions, and usually it's like, yeah, okay, Halo obviously is meant for people, not, the T for teen. They just won't say it. But when something was rated M and I saw that it was like really disturbing, I stayed away from that stuff. Like, I don't enjoy watching gore. Shockingly, I know. So just because a game is super gory like Gears of War, I didn't want it, for that reason alone. But yeah, I think I've covered, pretty much everything, and like most of the story aspects of Halo. I mean, the way it ended, I think, was one of the best endings in video game history, despite all that, because it's like, finally we can lay it to rest. There's no like super happy ending. Chief doesn't get back to Earth. He's kind of out there, and they don't know what's happened to him, and it's basically kind of left up in the air. And it's basically, that's a noble kind of death. And he's in cryostasis, and he says, "Wake me when you need me." Like, all the dialogue of these games are so well done, and so thoughtful, and so well thought out, I guess, that I don't know. It's just the perfect way to end the series. It's a somber ending with our two main characters in the dead of space, waiting to be revived some years later. And we thought it'd be decades before we got another Halo game, but then, Bungie, after their contract was up with Microsoft, said, hey, we're going to force another studio to continue Halo, regardless if people want it or not. And that's when 343 came into the picture, and that's where everything got worse. But that is the story for another time, maybe? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm going to talk about the 343 games, because there's really not much to talk about. They just kind of suck or are mid. I might take this opportunity to talk a little bit of Halo Reach because I don't really feel like talking about it. Yeah, I might actually. I might do a Reach review because I really didn't like that game either. And again, this is kind of the point where every Halo game after 3 just I felt got worse. It kind of peaked with 2 and then just got worse. I mean, call Gaben what you will, but his idea of, you know, sequels and support seems to actually work. Anyway, I still have some pretty good memories from this game, and it's not downright awful, but the expectations I had for it were so astronomically high, and it just objectively its predecessors did things better than it. That you can just obviously see that, you know, I can't help but feel that this just did not live up to its potential or its expectations, and we'll never get a game quite like this ever again, or even the game we anticipated getting. And that's kind of where Halo sits today. I mean, I had tons of fun playing multiplayer, local Forge with my brothers, lots of great memories, but overall the game is not as good as what came before it. And that's just how it is. And now we kind of close the door on Halo, and its sequels are, you know, there's Reach, which is like whatever, and then there's the 343s, which are just, again, like whatever. Halo no longer is this beast, this machine, and now Bungie makes Destiny, which is, again, a very whatever game, more whatever than this, and apparently they're making Marathon, but that's just in name only. They're gonna, you know, make a different kind of shooter just with Marathon's name. So that's where we are now. That's where gaming is. We basically peaked, you know, not too long after this, and yeah, that's it. Anyway, I've thought about making this video for a long time. I always put it off because I was never sure if my arguments were airtight, if you know, my points about the story, the things, getting negative backlash about criticizing what probably was a lot of people's favorite game. And I've just reached the point now where I'm just doing these podcasts where I'm just giving my off-the-cuff opinion. I was planning to have like a script and everything, and documents, and a whole like timeline and everything. And I just thought, no, I'm just gonna speak from my heart and from my mind and just put it out there and just get it done, because I can't stand not saying anything rather than saying something. I'd rather say something poorly than not say anything after all these years. And even after all this time, I've still kind of chilled out. I'm not as passionate about it as I used to be. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. That's Halo 3, and that's this video. See ya.